Hi, Darryl Crow here. Thanks for joining with me. It's Monday morning, and you know what that means. We've got another oil painting tip for you. And introducing my good friend, Joe Kaczynski. How are you, Joe?
Great, Darryl. How are you doing?
Do we have any questions today?
Yes, we do. Got some really good ones. The first one's from Ray Ashfield. And he says, "Hi, Darryl. I have a problem with blending in acrylics. If I use a soft brush, it does not seem to blend. Is it that the acrylic is gone dry? Using a hard bristle brush, it seems to leave it with lines. I've just started painting, but just can't seem to make blending easy, either with skies or anything else. I've looked at some of your blending ideas, but I can't grasp it. Can you help? Do I have to use oil paints and not acrylics? Regards, Ray."
Well, I'll be honest with you, Ray. You can blend with acrylics, okay? So let's go over, maybe by another explanation, we can help you find out what that missing link is that you're missing. You know, when I was first starting out, evergreen trees gave me fits. They kept me up nights for months. But it wasn't until I understood something that my instructor had been telling me for over 6 months, but when I got it, it would open up a whole new door. So hopefully we can open up a whole new door for you today. So let's head on down to the palette and just see how we get started. Okay, first I want to take a moment. We're just going to paint up a nice sky. That should give you enough information on how to blend, because it won't matter whether it's clouds or skies or waterfalls, etc. I've got a little bit of titanium white, a little ivory black, and a little Prussian blue. We're going to use two different brushes here. One is a soft blending brush. This is a hockey brush. It's about 1 inch wide, okay? And if you studied my acrylic techniques, you'll understand this setup. We have a full series of DVDs on the basic techniques of acrylics, and I show you all the supplies and the setup. But basically, I've got a stay wet palette with a paper palette here that has a coating on one side. There's a wet paper towel. I put the paints onto the top and I spray. In order to keep the paint soft, okay, we've got to cut down the evaporation. By putting the wet paper towel underneath, that stops the paint from evaporating downward. By putting a thin, misty coat of water over the tops of the paint, that's going to prevent the evaporation on top of the paint. So this will keep your paints wet throughout your painting. Okay, now over here I have a bristle brush. Now I have an old silverware tray, just a single tray, that I put water in here. You can see that when I bounce up and down the brush. And that's to keep my brushes wet. Now I use a different one for cleaning brushes in, but when I want to just store my brushes until I need them, they go right in here. Now the white one, if I just keep it, or the light soft brush, if I just keep it here, that will keep it nice and soft. Now let's start out by looking at the medium. I have here an even flow medium, and let me just grab the bottle and show you what I mean. See here, this is from Winsor & Newton. It's called Acrylic Flow Improver. Chroma has theirs, Martin F. Weber has theirs, and all of the companies have different acrylic mediums. These are excellent because you can wet the canvas with them to begin with, and secondly, you do not get water buildup or water holes, if you will, in your paint. So I'm going to go ahead here, and the very first thing I'm going to do, or I'm just shaking it, is wet my canvas. So let's go up to the canvas. I have here an old, you see a diagram on it, but that's okay. There we are. Just go ahead and wet this. It's so important to get your structure totally wet to begin with. And this little 1 inch brush that I have, it's an angled bristle. See that? And it just does a good job of very quickly taking this medium and stretching it all over. Now I don't wipe this dry afterwards. Okay, and it doesn't matter if I have something else here. This was a canvas that I actually picked up at a yard sale. So I see a lot of old canvases of painters that have just given up, and I'll buy them for a quarter, 50 cents a piece. So this is one of those. Alrighty, now I want to put a nice light blue sky. So I'll use the white gesso that I have here. I use this as a medium as well as white paint. So we'll grab a little bit. Ah, there we go. See that? Got a nice little. Now I'm going to gray the color with just a touch of black. Now, the thing to remember about acrylics is they dry darker than you have. So you try to get the color you want, and that's the color of sky I want, and then you go a little bit lighter. Okay? Remember how I did that. I went as dark as I wanted, and then a little bit lighter. Okay, let's come back up to the canvas. Hey, I'm going to put a couple of clouds up here. Oh, look at that color. All right, so we'll just go ahead and block out a spot for, there we go. Actually, I'm just going, because I have the drawing underneath, I'm just going to go ahead and cover everything. All righty, and we'll come back here, grab a little bit more. And there we go. Got ourselves a nice bit of color. And I'll even grab some more of this. See, it's pretty easy when you already have the color down there to add more. That way you can match it up pretty good. Okay, a little bit of the black to gray it. All right. And here we go. And make sure it covers the whole area nice and thick. All right, well, that's pretty much the sky area I'd like to use. And so I'll just make sure it's, one of the problems that I see is some people don't use enough paint. Okay, because acrylic is very thin, they believe they do not have to use a lot of acrylic as long as it kind of goes over. But you do, you know, acrylic levels, so it's constantly moving, if you will, more so than oils. Now, with that done, I'm just going to grab a fine mist spray bottle, okay, and it's full of water, just H2O, and just lightly spray. The thing to do is stand back and spray a little bit, then take a paper towel. Once in a while your colors will run. If that happens, just take your brush, see, just hit it a bit. They generally run on me when I'm rushing. Okay, so now, see, I just take this and clean it out best as I can. And now here's where the fun part begins. All right, I'll set that aside for just a second. I'll take a little bit of the white, see that? A little bit of the white and gesso and titanium white mixed together. All right, here we go. Now, with just the tip, I'm going to go ahead and put in a nice little cloud. And I can sit there and tap it if I want. Okay, now, that's the first layer. One of the things you're going to note is that you must do a couple of applications of white to keep this bright. All right, so here we go. See, I'm cleaning my brush. It's very soft now. A lot of these brushes will dry hard and you need the water in order. Now watch this, using just the tip of this brush. So see, there I am, and see that acrylic is super wet. And I'm using this brush and it's just using the upper corner just like I would in oil. See, just like that, and blending in everything except the very edge. All right, so we have a nice little cloud. All right, now I'm just taking the paper towel and wiping off my brush, and then like up in the air, up in the air. up in the air, very light. 2 hairs and some air. All right, now notice that I've always been telling you that acrylic dries darker, and so we see it going ahead. See how I just changed that edge? Okay. Now, let's come back here with some pure titanium white. All right, just like that. And now I'm going to go ahead and brighten up that edge. See? Flip it over to the other side and blend it in, see? Just like it would with oil. And that's pretty much all there is to this. Well, Ray, I hope you've enjoyed that tip. And Joe, do we have another question?
Yes, we do, Daryl. And this is from Barb from Rochester. And she says, you asked for questions, so what does graying a color mean? I seen it in the book and it don't define it. Barb.
Okay, well, there's something interesting about graying, and that is this. It's one of the most perfect neutral colors that there is in the whole spectrum of colors. And so it's an excellent choice when you do not want colors to be as they are out of the tube. You know, very shiny, and you want to dull them just a little bit. Then this is a neutral color that you can use. Now, which colors you use for graying will depend upon the color you're trying to tone down. And the best way, there are like 3 different techniques that people teach, but the one I believe in the most is complement. So you take a look at a color wheel, and if you're trying to gray down green, use a spot of orange. If you're trying to gray down orange, use a spot of green. So take a look at the color wheel, find out what the opposite color is. Now, Joe, there's an interesting thing about gray. Did you know that?
No, Daryl, why don't you tell me about it?
Well, did you know that gray stands for intellect, intelligence, and wisdom?
Well, that's why I'm wearing a gray sweater.
And I see you're using your gray matter to come up with that.
So am I.
Okay, Joe. Thank you for that question, Barbara.
Now we have another beautiful question here. This is from Joy. What is negative space? And don't count the matter between my ears.
Negative space. Well, negative space is the space between objects in a painting that you want the viewer to look at. Most people tell you negative space is just strictly the distance between objects, but really it's the objects you want the viewers to take a look at. And you know what, Joe?
What, Daryl?
There's a very simple explanation to show people what I mean.
Well, Daryl, why don't you give me the real complex explanation, seeing as how it's so simple?
All right, the complex is on its way. Well, Joe, I'd like you to tell me, what am I looking at here?
You're looking at a vase.
So the vase is the object, and you just can imagine some flowers in it, right?
That's correct.
Or pears.
Yeah, apples.
Yep. So anyway, the white then is the negative space.
Ah.
Okay? Now, let's change this exact same symbol and look at it differently.
Why don't we change the exact same symbol and look at it differently?
All righty. Well, let's look at the same symbol differently.
Okay.
So, Joe, what's the object here?
Wow, I see a couple of, although it's the same object, I now see 2 faces staring at each other.
That's right, because this is now negative space.
Ah.
Because as an artist, this person now is focusing you onto the image. And they did it by choice of colors.
Very interesting, Daryl.
So this is a lot of the power of negative space. But in order to utilize this, you have to decide, what is it that I want my people to look at when they're looking at my painting? And so here I can see what's around the vase as the image, or in the other one I can see just the vase. So I, as the artist, have the power to determine which of these particular ones that I would take a look at. Now, let's take a look at a couple of paintings to see that are easy to spot negative space.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, Joe, what would you say is the absolute main object?
The ship,
Are there any second or third objects?
the sails,
That's part
the
of the ship.
ocean, the waves,
The waves, okay? And I would say that maybe the clouds too.
clouds also.
Everything else is negative space.
Okay,
The ocean here is negative space, but I have waves. And I have waves here, and I have clouds here. Now, I didn't make them as prominent as my main object, okay? And so while they are white, they are a duller white.
okay,
But the real negative space is down here and in the blue sky.
very interesting.
Okay, so this is a way you decide which elements do I want people to focus on. Now, it's all part of composition. This is called a triangular composition because the shadow is triangular, the ship is triangular to the sails and the waves. You know, so it's a triangular composition. Even the lines are triangular. Let's take a look at another painting.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, Joe, what do you think is the most important object in here?
Well, I would have to go with the lakes.
Exactly. You see, we use color in this case again, but rather than it being bright color, we used blue. And for the pond up here, we used red. So because they are unique and eye-catching, then the white, which we had used before in the other painting to be negative, to be positive space, this is now negative space. All of this is just negative space. But because we have this intermix with dark up here, then these become secondary objects. But the primary object is still the lakes and the pond.
All right, wow.
And so what is the value again of negative space? You use negative space in order to focus attention on your positive elements. Let me show you another example. So, Joe, in this particular painting, what would you say is the main object?
The waterfall.
And why is that?
For the simple reason that it stands out with the blend of color.
Okay. Now, what is the secondary object?
Secondary object would be the bushes on the left-hand side and the right-hand side.
Okay. These?
Well, my attention is drawn to all of them. Their colors seem the same, so it would be the rocks and the bushes.
Yeah. This is a painting whose design, I would say, is still flawed.
It is.
Yes, because you see, it's not making good use of positives and negatives in this particular painting.
Well, let's shoot the artist.
Yes, we could shoot him or her, and but in any event, you see what's nice is because of the smallness of this backward water, it brings you right to here. So if it is catching your eye with color, your attention, it's like it's pointing to this waterfall. The waterfall is the main object, is supported by the composition, but when you get into the secondary, then there's way too much overwhelming negative space, okay? Now, there was an attempt here to bring in the second one space by using the same color as the waterfall to show the shadow side with just the highlight. But because this design over here is overwhelming with white and this is overwhelming with white, there's no real way to say that this design is successful. So the artist is still working on this, I happen to know. And I should have it finished sometime in, the next decade. But in any event, you can look at a design and say there's something wrong with it. One of the things that I can do is start to look at where is my eye focusing and why don't I focus on other spots? And then start to compare the negative space color with the positive space colors.
Wow.
And you can start to see, this is very, very advanced stuff, but this was an advanced question. Okay, let's take a look at one final area. I'm sure you remember this painting, Joe.
Yes, I do.
And what do you think are the 3 or 4 primary focal points here?
Well, the poinsettia flower itself, the candle, and the vase.
I don't really think the vase is seen much
Well,
because the positive color is the red, right?
right.
Now look where the attention is drawn just by red. It's drawn here on the flower leaves of the poinsettia, on the candle, and on the glow behind the candle, and then just right here on the table, and then you see the vase.
Yeah, but see, by me answering the vase, that gave you a chance to explain the reality of the painting.
Ah, there you go. Now, what's the negative space? The negative space is where you don't really want the eye to go, which is over here. It's under the table because we don't want anybody looking under the table. And over here, outside of the influence of the flame, this is all negative space. And although we have a nice pretty wreath here, we're really not interested. Now, notice that orange is a complement of green. And so by virtue of this being part yellow and part red, this seems to disappear. And so the blend of those two colors is producing a negative space here. And that carries over here. In reality, these colors here are much more vibrant. However, because they're on the neutral side or the complement side of the yellow-red mixture, they become negative space. And they divide it between here. And the vase is negative space, and behind the vase is all negative space. So what's the value in studying negative space and positive space? It's simply this. Once you've mastered the basic techniques of painting, once you practice all the different techniques that you want to learn, and once you've started to compose your own painting, and you started to design and you're mixing color, now you can start to pay attention to things like negative space. And the way you do it is by beginning with that age-old statement. What do you want the guy who's buying the painting to look at first? I'm Daryl Crow. This has been an enjoyable day giving you these painting tips. I look forward to next week. Send us your questions, and I got a gift for you. And remember this, it's the most important thing you can ever remember. Yes, you can paint.